right, good morning. Can you guys hear me okay? Is this good enough? Yep. All right, Chase, thank you. Hey, so good morning, everyone. My name is Brad Steadman. I work at Dell Technologies, and similar to what Christina just was talking about, I'm on the product side. I actually will, I'm in the business. I'm not a coach. I actually don't coach. You'll see up there, I'm actually the chief product owner of our Agile practice, and those of you that are familiar with Scrum at Scale as a framework, that's what Dell is installing. So a little bit about this presentation is what do you do when you already have a network that is in place and you're going to install another one. So if you're familiar, and I was just talking to Chase about this, if you're familiar with Cotter, he is a change management guru, and he talks a lot about the dual operating model where you have your hierarchy and then go back to what was working for you when you were a startup, which is install this sort of nimble matrix organization. And Dell already does that. It's one of the recipes of our success. We have that network. It's just that it is not as nimble as we want it to be. So we are pursuing business agility. So that's some of the context. I have a few more things of context on here for you. So first off, I'm talking about products that go to the marketplace, go-to-market products. We obviously have an IT department. There is all that stuff within Dell, but I am referring to products that go to market. Dell follows already a deliberate software development lifecycle, or SDLC. And we all know the S is swap. Sometimes it is system development lifecycle, but for this case, it'll be software development lifecycle. So I have that in the blue color there. So that's our existing network. We selected Scrum at Scale as our Agile or our Scrum framework, and that is the second network. And we did a whole bunch of deliberate research into this. We actually tried SAFe in another area of the business, and it didn't quite work for Dell, and that is why we are doing Scrum at Scale. And we're in our 4th year of our transformation. We started with something we called Agile at Core, which was trying to install it within the team level, and now we're scaling up from that. So that's some context for you. So let me give you a little bit of a diagram here. This is sort of a typical business unit, and that's what we mean by BU. And so in the business unit, they usually have 3 arms. They have a product management arm, they have an engineering arm, and they have a PMO arm. And there's a lot of great articles out there. What do you do with the PMO during a transformation? And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But that is typical. And then we form a matrix, which we here are calling a program team. And those people don't report to each other, ideally, although you will find that in the case in engineering, there is a reporting relationship. But they don't report to each other in this network. And that is the typical formation of it. So you see a product manager there. You see an engineering development manager there. You see a program manager there. And then we have others plug in, like procurement plugs in, manufacturing plugs in, quality plugs in, services plugs in. And that's so that we have a complete product end-to-end for the customers. That's the standard model. A lot of folks do that. But it is what I'll call network number 1. So what do you do when you're trying to install the second network? Everybody's confused now in terms of the 2 networks. Why is my role changing, or what role is am I doing in the new network versus the old network? And overcoming that is a challenge for us. Can't gain our development speed that we want to, and the transformation is taking longer than we hope it will. So let me talk a little bit about then the roles and what those folks are struggling with. So on our program side, the program type of a team, there is, again, the engineering community, which we have tried to transform, and they hit a ceiling, right? They can only transform so much when the rest of the organization is kind of waterfall or phase-based or whatever you want to call that term. And those roles, program manager, product manager, development manager, developer, those are the key roles, and they're all living in that network, and they know what to do. Dell has done this for decades. It's a recipe for success. We've done this for decades, and that model works. And so Cotter is onto something when he tells you, hey, go back to something that you did with a startup. But when you introduce this second network, now you've got conflict, because as a lot of these articles that are written out there about program management, they are literally champions of that process. They keep that process going, they encourage that process, they advocate for that process, they evangelize that process, they enforce that process, they govern that process. And that is what we're up against in our challenge right now. So some of the roles map, some of the roles don't map. But what we have found, though, is that, as you all know, Scrum Masters are the equivalent. They champion the Scrum process. They nurture, advocate, evangelize the Scrum process. They are a built-in coach, a built-in change agent. And that is at odds when you're trying to create a second network from one that you already have. So what are we doing about this? So our next Kaizen that we're doing, and we're actually in discussions, and this is being all designed out, and we're about to install this bad boy, and that is that let's put something in there that's a parallel to the program management office that can champion the second network while you still champion the first one, because we're in a transitional state. You have to have both alive at the same time. There's a lot of things that are going to compete in that space. So that's what this is intended to show. Now, this is where economics comes into play. Economics works really well, obviously, when you talk about financials and products, supply, demand. It also works on talent. And that's at least our hypothesis, I'll say. Our hypothesis is that it'll work on talent. So as we transition from the one type of network to the second type of network, then the demand for Scrum Masters is going to go up. And therefore, supply of Scrum Masters needs to go up to match that demand. And contrary to that, demand for program managers is going to go down. And therefore, supply is probably going to match demand, and program managers, the demand and the supply are going to match. So that is the hypothesis that this is going to test out for us. And we're super excited about putting this one into place. Well, you notice here that there's always this conversation between the hierarchy and the network, and the work gets done in the network. The to-do list flows in the network. So the agility office that we're talking about here, similar to the program management office, is really a supplier of talent. It is a developer of talent. It is a trainer and a teacher of that talent, and it ideally will promote and create an environment where Scrum can thrive. But all of that to-do list, the backlogs themselves, exist in the network. They exist in our agile practice, which is similar to a center of excellence or a center of enablement, and within the program teams, the system of delivery. So the same, those two can run in parallel, and we can exist with one hierarchy and two networks if we need to, because the champion of each network is in their own department, and then their own ability to be shielded from the other and the competing pieces of that. So that is the nutshell of my story, and I have a lot of time now for Q&A. And I can go back to, if anybody wants to, I can go back to any slide that you guys want to talk about. Does this bring up any questions?
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are trying to kind of get away from like the hierarchical structure and being more collaborative and more open lines of communication to where everybody can communicate together and feel like they're all working together. Is that kind of what I gather?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the whole premise behind, Kotter's argument or proposal, is that the hierarchy itself is sort of there as a need to, for finances to flow, who has the department, cost centers, who has the spend, those kind of things. Who do you report to, right? Who writes your performance review at the end of the year? That is all necessary business stuff. But we want the to-do work to happen in the network. So as a leader, as the one leading the agility office, I develop really good Scrum leaders and Scrum Masters. That's my job. Develop them, grow them, help their career, make sure that they are protected from, as what Christina was talking about, protected from other influences, protected from other challenges. But put them in the network, I give them to the network for them to go and do the work. And the work flows down through the product owner cycle. So it's meant to keep those things compartmentalized. Now the trick is that if you look at our other network I was just talking about, management is involved, especially in the engineering world. A lot of times the development manager is truly a manager. He happens to own an army of software developers who are coding this particular application. So a lot of times you'll find relationships between the manager and the application. In other words, we're all familiar with the website Dell.com, for example. That product, that development manager who is responsible for Dell.com, all the engineers are reporting to that person. We're trying to get away from that, because then that manager says, well, I'm accountable, and they keep using that term. It's like, no, you develop good developers. The product owners need to be accountable for the outcome. So.
Hey, Brad, what was the question?
Sorry about that. I didn't repeat the question. His question was, are you trying to solve for the conflict between, when people are getting tasked within both networks, I think is a way of saying it. And we're trying to create a space where they can collaborate.
Right, yes, I was asking if they were trying to get away from like the hierarchy system and into more of like a collaborative where we've got teammates all working together on one big project as opposed to siloed teams kind of, to what Christina talked about earlier.
Right, yeah. So are we trying to get away from the hierarchy? The answer is no, we're not trying to get away from the hierarchy. But we need to compartmentalize that.
I'm curious to know why you went with Scrum and Scale versus Scaled Agile, or do you have a good,
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, why did we pick Scrum at Scale? We did an enormous amount of research. I actually was borderline impatient as we were researching this. And we talked to a ton of companies out there. We talked to Tesla, Microsoft, even HP, who we compete with. Just a bunch. And, it came down to two things. One of our sister divisions had actually tried both Scrum at Scale and SAFe, so we could see it in action within Dell. The other primary reason we took it to comes back to what I was saying about those roles. The power of three. It comes down, Dell's current network number one works on a power of three. We have a program manager, a product manager, and development manager. Scrum at Scale, same thing, power of three. Scrum master, product owner, developer. So for Dell, it's actually easier for us to help with that mental mind shift that we're taking a network one of power of three and network two of a power of three. It's all a power of three. Where it starts to really challenge Dell is that now we're asking managers, directors, and vice presidents to fill one of those roles because the whole idea is building teams all the way up the stack. Great question. Any others?
So how are you getting the executives involved? Like when you just said the difficult part is, how's the buy-in when a lot of the services aren't tangible right away? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So his question is buy-in before you're actually producing tangible results. This to me, I think, is one of the toughest challenges for the agile transformations. And again, my conversation with Chase earlier is that you guys who are in the agile space, you're not just Scrum, agile advocates. You have to be a student of change as well. There's a change management component. So your question is, how do you get buy-in when you can't show the tangible results? There's several techniques. The technique that I personally used with them is that the industry has plenty of data on it. There's a ton of white papers on it. So arguing that Scrum is a weak methodology, there's tons and tons of literature out there that proves that it's not. The argument becomes is, oh, you don't think it's going to work here because we're a snowflake, like we're unique? Is that what it is? Like it won't succeed here? So what we did then is we have agreement that as we scaled up, we did one program. We're going to do one program, and we're going to pour a lot of energy and time into it. We're going to transform that program, and we're going to learn from that one program, and then we're going to show you from that one program that there are results. And the greatest result that I think is the management cannot neglect and deny is that our employees prefer to work this way. When you put them in this environment, and Christina had a great example where they accelerated and they did not want to leave that space. They didn't want to leave the space because they preferred it. They want that. So all this discussion going on in the public space about talent retention, talent development, investing in your talent. The only reason a business is any good is because the talent you have. Dell's no different. We love our talent. We are all about focused on talent. So you want to move an executive? You say, oh, listen, I'm sorry. I don't have the courage to tell these people they can't work this way. Can you go tell them? Because I don't. I can't do that to them. And they won't. They won't. So that's the technique that we've employed. Yes, sir.
So in a situation where there's kind of a dual operating model, and I have a hierarchical group that has funding, and I have a product group that's accountable for delivery, how do you deal with the inevitable tension between the people who are writing checks who continuously get nervous about whether they're going to get what they expect when they write the check?
Yeah, so his question is, the checks are usually written in the hierarchy, and the development is done in the network, and how do you reconcile when the hierarchy can shut off the money? Is that a fair summary of it?
Or just how do you getting what they expect for the money?
Yeah, and again, Agile is brilliant for this because it's promoting transparency. It's part of the 12 principles. It's transparency, transparency, transparency. So you're not trying to say, look, write me a check and I'll come back in 6 months with a product. You're saying, write me a check, and if you want to, write me small amounts. And I'll just keep showing you my progress, and you keep writing the checks.
Is there a formal review you set up with them, or do you make that part of the normal kind of process reviews?
So for anybody who's familiar with Scrum at Scale, that whole framework is built on, you build Scrum teams up the Scrum Master side, and you build product owner teams up the Meta Scrum side. So we established an executive action team. And we have an executive product owner who's he's a senior vice president. He happens to be the senior vice president of engineering, but on that executive action team is a senior vice president for PMO Biz Ops, which is my boss. We have the product management leadership in there as well, but they're formulated in a Scrum team. And so the hierarchical heads that have the checkbooks are on the executive action team. So we're pulling the money from them through the network. Yes, they're writing it out of the hierarchy. Yes, it's tracked within the hierarchy. Of course it is. But we're pulling and asking for the money through the network. So those scaling structures are critical, absolutely critical. Because if you don't have that, and the moment you break away from a program team and then you go into the hierarchy to ask for money, it begins to be that conflict that you're describing. So for us, it's like, all right, take the executives, make them a Scrum team. And that's again, another great fit for Scrum at Scale. And she keeps nodding, so I guess I got a fan over there for that methodology. So I know we are about out of time. Any other last questions for me on this topic? Yes, sir?
Do you find that the executives are more in tune because they're kind of on the front lines of these teams?
Excellent question. His question is, are the executives more attuned because of this methodology? Absolutely. In fact, the executive product owner, who again is our senior VP of engineering, he has said, this is, out of all the programs going on in his world, this is the one program he is absolutely the most attuned to. And he said that he can go into any meeting and talk about that program, and he doesn't need to ask anybody for updates leading, I got to go talk to the president, send me an update, fill me in, what's the stat? No, he can go right in there and talk with full knowledge because he's on a Scrum cycle with us. So it's pretty brilliant model for us. And yeah, so the executives are definitely well informed. One last question before I conclude? If not, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for having me, and you guys have a great day.
Round of applause.